Really what I want to talk about today is there is a difference between security and resilience. And I'm going to talk about that because for years, and I've been in this industry around 30 years, we've focused on security, but have we really delivered it? And I think today we need to focus much more on resilience. And that's not because I now find myself working for a company that's focused on data management. It's because after those 30 years, I've realized the nature of our attacks is we can never prevent everything. And so I haven't always sat on the vendor side of the fence, which is why I saw the results of the surveys that went out were really interesting, because pretty much they were answered exactly the way that I would have answered them. So you'll see a lot of the things that were the most popular results of the surveys are the things that we're talking about today. So just a bit about my background, because it'll set some context. At Rubrik, I'm a field chief information security officer. So my role is to work as a peer with operational knowledge with senior executives in cybersecurity within our customers to try and understand their problems that aren't always technological. Some of them are cultural and politics and the way organizations are structured, and then how they can use platforms like Rubrik to improve their cyber resiliency. So before doing this, I was at HP Enterprise for 10 years, where I built security operations centers. I had a team of 65 consultants. I built the security operations centers at Apple, Walmart, Microsoft, Vodafone, Bank, FedEx, Deutsche Telekom, the Ministry of Defense in the UK. And there were a lot of common problems to these. So I spent, good 20 years in protection and detection. And I've realized that we can't do that 100%. And that's what I'm going to talk about. Before that, I was at JP Morgan Chase. So I headed up their cyber excellence department. So we're the people that set the target operating model for the business. And I handled the cyber transformation, the alignment to NIST cyber security framework that I'm going to talk about today. And before that, I was the CISO at Mimecast and several other organizations. So I spent 20 years doing this. And this is one of the major reasons why I have no hair. I spent 20 years as a CISO, 10 years before that in IT. And so everything I talk about today is because I've sat on your side of the fence. This isn't a vendor talking. This is someone who's used vendors' products to deliver operational outcomes. So I'm going to talk very little about a product and very much about an approach today. So ransomware. We're in a world of coronavirus at the moment, and there's a difference between a symptom and a disease or a virus. And I see ransomware as a symptom. It is not actually the problem, just like a cough is a symptom of COVID. The actual problem is a lack of resilience. Right? The reason why businesses are being impacted by ransomware is because of this historical focus on defense, prevention that we have, rather than our ability to sustain attacks that happen on us with minimal business impact so that we can continue business. And again, this is a topic that's going to come through this again and again and again. And, all vendors do this. I'm going to put a slide up and it's going to show you all of the ransomware headlines. I don't need to do this because here in the UK, the National Cybersecurity Centre said the biggest risk to the UK economy is not Brexit, us leaving the European Union. It's not COVID. It's not supply chain issues. It is ransomware. It is the biggest systemic risk to the economy in the United Kingdom. And that is a very bold statement to make. So I'm not going to focus on telling you this. You know this already. But the problem we have in security is we've got this moat and wall mentality. We keep buying more and more products. We build the walls higher and we build the moats wider. And, the average enterprise now has 130 different security products installed. And as CISOs, we continue to moan about the skill shortage. We can't get people. Why? Because we've deployed 130 different security products that all need management, all need licensing, and all need integration. And what makes it even worse is we have an annual budgetary cycle. So we choose products, we send an RFI out, we POC the products, we deploy it. It's already August in the year by the time we deploy it. There's no real time to operationalize and integrate those products before we're already doing our risk assessments and looking at next year. So we've got, this is my experience of going into 220 different organizations to try and get them ready to build security operations capabilities. When I've assessed their actual operational capability, lots of products, not a lot of process, not a lot of integration. So, one of the things that we can do is focus on products that work, right? Focus on tools that work and ones that can work together to deliver outcomes. So the trouble with this higher wall, wider moat, apart from the cost to ourselves and the cost of management, is we're facing a human adversary. So, we all know Troy built very big walls, couldn't get attacked, and then the Trojan horse went straight through the middle of it. Adversaries are adapting. They're constantly changing their behavior. They are understanding what we are doing, and they are working around it. And now we've got problems with things like ransomware as a service, which has lowered the barrier of entry to people to launch ransomware attacks. So this is why we can never, ever truly prevent and detect everything, which is why we need to focus much more in the tail end of incidents. And the world is very different now. So now we have complex supply chains, bring your own device, the move to cloud, continual integration, continuous deployment and agile development methods, containerization, the Internet of Things and industrial control systems, working from home, and then microservices and things like that. So I remember like that original image where I could walk into my data center and wrap my hands around a physical server. I had 55,000 servers when I was at Mimecast as the CISO, and I could go and see them. Now that is cattle. We used to treat our IT like pets. Now it's cattle. We can stand up a hardware and a software instance in seconds and configure it with things like Chef and Puppet. The value is in the data. It is the data and the lack of access to that data that ransomware operators use to attack us. It's that data, the exfiltration and the monetization of it, which they are after. We need to change our focus from understanding our hardware and software assets only, and very few organizations can even do that. But as we move to orchestration systems and virtual instances and cloud instances, it's actually much easier for us to understand what we have from a hardware and software perspective, but it's not where the value is. The value is in the data. So there's a king. He was a Saxon king, and he was in the UK, and he thought he was so powerful that he could stand at the seaside, put his hand up, and stop the tide coming in. This is actually quite a lot of CISOs. So, businesses are deploying all of those things that are on the previous slide. They are moving to the cloud. And sometimes there's this adversarial relationship between a CISO that tries to stop the advancement of the business. And we see, everyone as idiots in the business. No, people are just trying to do their job in very difficult economic circumstances and competitive and very agile businesses. They're the ones that bring money in. As CISOs, we spend it. We are our cost center. And until we align with the business and we support these initiatives for the business to make money and become more competitive, we are always going to be a cost center. And if we try and get in the way, I love this diagram. It's a shame I don't have a higher res version of it. People will just work around any control that we have. If it's too awkward, it gets in the way of the business, people will just work around us. And we end up not making the business more secure. So we've got this scenario where we have to work with other people in the business much more. We have to understand our data, and we have to make sure that we're supporting the business with value. But are we doing this? Like, what does the last 10 years look like? So when I first started building security operations centers in 2011, when I first set the team up, I used to go in and I evaluated 225 different areas of operational capabilities, so people, process, technology, business alignment. And I'd rate them on a CMMI scale, Carnegie Mellon Maturity Index or Capability Maturity Model Index, depending on how old you are. 0, someone's doing nothing. 1, it's ad hoc. Every person does it differently. It's done differently every time. 2, you documented you're doing it. 3, you collect metrics. 4, you use those metrics to make things better on a continual basis. 5, you have quantitative metrics. So you can attach a value to everyone, every process, every control, every person. Now, these are the largest organizations in the world that I did this for. So in 2011, the average score was only somewhere between ad hoc and documented. And these are big companies, Fortune 100, FTSE 100 organizations. And the industry as a whole, in the territory that I've taken these figures for, was spending 30 billion on cybersecurity. Then I go to when I left the practice, the average has gone up 6.9%, but we had over doubled what we were spending. Right? So operational capability had gone up less than 7%, but we over doubled what we're spending. This is because there is no linear relationship between buying more security products, especially in prevention and detection, and your actual ability to operationalize those and deliver cybersecurity outcomes with them. And if you look at the MITRE ATT&CK framework, there are 4 controls that will detect 86% of the MITRE ATT&CK techniques that are out there. Yet businesses are buying 130 controls, spending all that money, but having all those people to manage them and not detecting a lot of these instances, which is why we're seeing ransomware attacks. And then we have, depending on whether my ex-boss at JP Morgan is the chap that came up with the Lockheed Martin kill chain, Rohan Amin, and then the MITRE ATT&CK, depending on which way you look, there are stages in an attack, which framework that you like. But until you get to that last stage, the only cost to your business is operational, the mopping up, the cleaning up after it. The actual impact comes at that last stage, right? So yes, we need to shift left. We need to make sure that we can prevent instances, but I see that as table stakes. That prevention and detection is the cost of doing business. The winning hand is actually being able to handle those incidents, recover from them, respond to them effectively and efficiently, and continue business. And I'll talk about why that's important now, because of the difference between malware and ransomware. So I like factor analysis of information risk. It is a risk assessment methodology. It's semi-quantitative, developed by a gentleman called Jack Jones. And just like all risk assessment methodologies, it has likelihood and it has impact. But then likelihood has 2 factors, one of which is how exposed is your device and how likely is someone to attack it? How motivated are they to attack it? What's their capability and how good are your controls? That's the vulnerability side of things. And then we have impacts. We have 2 types of impacts. And one of which is secondary, loss of reputation, loss of shareholder value, regulatory fines. The other one is primary, the inability to deliver the mission of your business. And with malware that we've seen for years, what we actually see is it looks like this, right? So really secondary losses, security vendors for years, and I've been taken to lunches by security vendors quite a lot when they've been trying to sell me products. It's all secondary loss until ransomware came along. It's all your shareholder value. It's all your regulatory fines. It's all loss of reputation. It wasn't really, apart from denial of service attacks and some large scale worms that come across every decade or so, wasn't really primary loss. And also launching an attack, traditional exfiltration attack using malware, average dwell time is 255 days. You had to go through all those stages of the attack, and those 130 products might have caught you. And then when you get the data out of the business, you have to monetize it. And that can take months to sell credit card records. You maybe get $1.50. per record. And then you compare that with ransomware. With ransomware, it can be used the same attack vectors, initial attack vectors, to get into the business. But something like Conti, you are monetizing within 3 days to 3 weeks. You're getting that ransom paid. So the motivation of attackers to attack you is much higher. The chances of getting caught much lower, because the dwell time, 3 hours, three weeks, instead of 255 days, the chances your controls catching them. But then the impact is the big difference. The impact impacts you and your supply chain and your ability to deliver business. This is why ransomware and malware from risk perspective are totally different. And yeah, you could say, well, I've got these prevention solutions. I've got these 130 different solutions out there. Well, in England, we have a saying, which is putting lipstick on a pig, right? So just because those products that you've used for antivirus and anti-malware for years, that the marketing departments of those vendors are suddenly calling them anti-ransomware, do you think they're really protecting you? Just think how many malware outbreaks you've had in the last year, right? The only difference between malware and ransomware, they use the same attack vectors, is outcome, that action on objectives. So it's just been luck that those malware infections have not been ransomware. Prevention simply does not work 100%. And then when you have an event, I always look at it like this. When there is a ransomware event, it is the CISO that is holding the toilet chain. It's ultimately him that's responsible for that ransomware outbreak. Yet all the plumbing in the recovery and response is typically built by the IT department. So we end up in this situation during a ransomware incident where it doesn't work very well. It's handed off. We have this scenario where we have all these wonderful tools where we build context and threat intelligence and case management and security orchestration. Then we create a text ticket and send it to the IT department. And that whole thing is in the language of security, not in the language of IT. What patches do they need to deploy to prevent the vulnerability reinfecting those machines when you recover them? Well, we talk CVEs, they talk patch numbers. So, having single platforms, the IT and security that deals with these two personas for handling these incidents, not just ransomware, but any incident that involves some form of recovery, is critical. And it prevents this two departments pointing at each other, which is not very useful when you are dealing with a ransomware incident. And I'm going to talk about my experience in a ransomware incident in a moment. So we need to get to this stage where we have a resilience mindset. So as I mentioned, the table stakes are your prevention and detection, but you can consolidate a lot of those and focus on the areas that add value. But you need to build this ability to withstand these instances. So there's this term, cyber resiliency. What is it? Well, the first thing is, it's not a noun. It's a verb. It's an adjective. It's something you do. It's an emergent property. It's not something you can buy. You can't go to Rubrik and say, can I have some cyber resiliency, please? And we deliver it for you. We deliver a platform which is very useful for building cyber resiliency. And I'll say it's one of the best, which is why I've come here. But you can't buy this. This is something you have to undertake as a journey. So I mentioned I was going to talk about an instance. I've been in 3 companies as a consultant as a part of the breach response for wiper or ransomware attacks. So I've been in there while IT and security departments are blaming each other and trying to use malware playbooks to deal with a ransomware incident. To give you some indication, I was at a company, so they've got the call lists. I'm going to call people to come and respond to this breach. Voice over IP isn't working because it's based on Windows and it been wiped. So they tried to log into their case management system. Guess what? Ran on Windows. It had been wiped. They tried to single sign on to their external provider. Well, their Active Directory server was down. They couldn't log on. This company actually bought 5,000 typewriters and had manual runners running between the different departments with typewritten reports about what were happening. Right? Ransomware is very different than malware, and you have to think about everything not being available. Right? So it's just something there. So I had quite a lot of hair until I had some of these incidents. So I'm going to talk a little bit now about what do we do? How do we approach this? So I like the NIST cybersecurity framework. I'm sure you all know what it is, but just in case anyone's not come across it, it's guidance on how to assess and manage cyber risk. It has a taxonomy of capabilities, so operational things that you should do. And it maps to control frameworks that are pretty popular across the world. And 70%, it's not just the US government, not just critical national infrastructure, which I was a part of when I was at JP Morgan, but 70% of CISOs around the world see it as best practice. So we have the 5 functions. So we have identification, protection, detection, response, and recovery. And then underneath that, we have 23 categories of capability. And then under these, we have the 108 subcategories. So these are the actual how you achieve those 23 categories. And then the thing I love the most is under each of those 108, it'll actually tell you exactly how to do this using any one of those common popular frameworks. So we've got these 5 functions, and in a resilient business, they're all equally as important. But the reality is, and I found this doing my assessments, this is what businesses look like. So people don't understand where their data is. They don't understand the compliance obligations of that data. It's even worse. They might know where data is in their databases, but have they got personally identifiable information in SharePoint servers, in email, in unstructured data sources? They're just not able to find that data. And as I mentioned earlier, data-centric security is the most important thing because that's where the value is. Everything else, hardware and software, is cattle these days. It's the data that's irreplaceable. I can spin up a cloud instance in seconds and configure it exactly like it was before using Ansible or something like that. So, one of the things we focus on is identifying that data. You're backing up things. You're backing up all of these different workloads. So we can look across that and identify where that data resides. So we can help you start with your data, do your risk management around data, rather than just guessing around what you're protecting. And then response and recovery. Now, as I mentioned earlier, these typically get thrown over the fence to IT. So we built a platform where those response and recovery activities, especially as they relate to ransomware, are all in a single platform with personas that are relevant for IT and personas that are relevant for security. So one of the things I love about Rubrik is we are originally, as a data management company, an IT-centric solution, right? Backup and recovery, but we've built all these security use cases that do the same things as XDR tools for hunting, that do the same things as discovery tools for identifying your data, and do the same things as digital forensics tools, because we can live mount your file systems at different points in time. Does the same as configuration change or file integrity monitoring. So all of these products, we had to have gone out and bought 5 or 6 different products and configured them. The backed up data, once you do that well and protect it well, actually becomes this ability to do those different things without you spending any more money. So NIST has this these various different advisories. This is the risk cybersecurity framework profile that defines 68 controls out those 108 that you should do to handle ransomware. And this is our mantra. And we actually deliver value against 48 of those 66 controls. And if anyone wants to do a more in-depth session about what they are, reach out to us and we can have that discussion. I'm going to give you some example use cases of those later. They've also got all of these requirements around data integrity, around for ransomware specifically, what should you look for in a backup and recovery solution? And again, we align to each of these different standards. So how do you become cyber resilient? Well, the first thing is become threat informed. Threat intelligence is useful, but a feed of threat intelligence is useless. So what you need to do is understand your data. And once you understand your data, you will understand how motivated someone is to come after it. You will understand the impact to your business if that data integrity or availability is lost, or if it's stolen, your regulatory obligations. So threat intelligence put in context with this discovery and knowledge of your data is critical. The other thing is hunting. Right? So if you get a new piece of threat intelligence, an indicator of compromise, how do you hunt for it? Well, a lot of organizations have got SIMs, log management servers, but the logs are only as good as your knowledge in advance about what you're logging. If it's a 0-day, if it's a new type of attack, you probably didn't know about it in advance to log it. Or if you have an XDR tool and you query that endpoint to look for that IOC, then there is a risk you are going to tip off that person because they've got control of that machine. They can see the incoming network connection, the process running for you to do the hunt and the query on it. So we have this ability to hunt across multiple different workloads, cloud, virtual machines, unstructured data, file systems, and look for those indicators of compromise without ever touching those machines, because we use the backed up data as the way of doing that. Sub-second Google-like search for indicators of compromise across multiple workloads. That's something that you just could not do before. The next thing is risk aligned. So this is understanding your data. And I mentioned this earlier, the risk to that data, the motivations and capabilities of the attacker. These two things, threat informed and risk aligned, go together. Then the ability to continually improve. And you want this, the adversary doesn't stop still. So you need platforms and systems that are agile, that can constantly change with the way that you change and your different workloads. So a lot of organizations are moving to the cloud. So having a data management solution with these security use cases that can handle your on-premise and your cloud instances is a game changer. Also, the ability to just look at change control and the applying of patches and vulnerability management. One thing Rubrik can do is take your on-premise production servers, create a digital twin of those, which you can put in the cloud, and then you can aggressively pen test that production environment. You might not want to do it on the real one, or use breach and attack simulation services against it, or create a deception grid, clone your production environment, put fake data in it, leave it in the cloud. These are advanced security concepts that are all enabled by Rubrik. We go way beyond just ransomware remediation. And then holistic, I mentioned this, IT and security working together in harmony on the same platform. So you have the identification that typically involves security and IT and the business working together. Then you have the protection and detection that largely sits in security. But then you have the response and recovery that sits and gradually goes out to IT. So we have a single platform that will handle this. It will show you the blast radius of a ransomware attack, so you understand the impact and you can prioritize it. It will then show you the changes in entropy or the anomalous deletion events that a user has done. And then it gives you one click, instant recovery, live mount those servers. We had a Australian building services company hit by ransomware, middle of the night, 4 o'clock in the morning, and all the machines wiped, like totally gone. And within 20 minutes, they had that ERP server back up and running and still delivering the logistics to make sure the orders were fulfilled. Compare that with the 5 weeks to 5 months that we're seeing businesses being impacted. So, the example I gave earlier, Saudi Aramco, while my team were there, oil kept flowing. because the drill heads and the industrial control systems were all well secured, but we couldn't charge anyone for the oil. So we started giving it away for free. And then we have 53-kilometer tailbacks over the border into the United Arab Emirates because the logistics systems were down and we couldn't send tankers to the right place or manage the tankers. So there's this interrelationship between all these different systems. And that's one of the things Rubrik does with app flows is it's a capability to work out these interdependencies between systems. But this live mount capability gives you this ability to bring them up, in near zero RTO time. So I just quickly talk about some of these use cases and then hand over for a demo. So I mentioned earlier, protection, identifying your data, identifying the blast radius, using that in your risk assessments. But also we protect your data, zero trust, immutable. We built our own file system. We had a lot of the engineers that worked on Google Colossus, the Google file system that indexes the entire web. They came to work for Rubrik. So we built this at-scale file system 7-8 years ago, but we knew about ransomware at this point in time. So we built a file system that's not based on any open source or commercial file system. It's our file system, and it has no change capability. There is no way to change our file system. It's just built that way. So this is not just immutability, the inability to change a record. There is no ability to do a change action on our file system. Zero trust, authenticated, multi-tenancy, hardened environments. These are all things, mutual authentication via certificates, working with your hardware security modules to protect your data. This is zero trust at the point of data. Then this ability to do clone environments, to do breach and attack simulation and aggressive pen tests. The ability to test your patches to make sure they don't have impact on production environments. We're API first. We can all be driven by orchestration and automation tools. So you can have a change control system where your vulnerability scanner finds something, we clone the production environment, you regression test the patch to make sure there's no impact, and then the change control system says yes or no to applying that change. I mentioned the hunting earlier. I mentioned deception grids earlier, cloning production environments and creating false environments for them to attack. And also radar, our ability to detect changes in entropy when files are being encrypted or anomalous deletion events. This is the standard thing. Then we have this ability to live mount systems at points in time to do forensics. So, this is Rubrik. This is what we do. With that note, I'd just say what we want to do is get you to this situation where ransomware events can just be handled by an analyst as a normal type of event. So that's all I've got to present to you today. So hopefully I've given you a vision for kind of what we do at a high level. And I'd like to hand over for a demo. So.
Sure. Okay, thank you, James. So let me quickly share my screen. So good evening, all. I'm Harish Nair. I'm one of the solutions architects here at Rubrik. And what we'd like to do today is kind of run a simulation of, when an attack happens, what are the different kinds of value adds that Rubrik can actually provide, right? So let me quickly share my screen. Right, perfect. So what we've done today is that we've tried backing up a server, as of yesterday. We wanted to run a ransomware script within that server to basically start encrypting the files and to see how Rubrik actually behaves with that as well, right? So we have one VM that we are actually protecting today. Let me just 1 second. Yeah. Now, what we had done is that in the task scheduler itself, we actually created a ransomware script and we executed the script today, right? This was actually late night. This is in the US time zone. So this was late night during the US hours. And once we executed this, we wanted to see how that impacted the server itself, right? So we could get onto the server. We could see that in each of those folders that we wanted to demonstrate this, you can actually see that the encryptions have already started, right? So all these files have actually been encrypted. Now, because I mentioned that we already did the backup of this, a day before we actually ran the script. Now I'll talk about, how exactly how exactly Rubrik starts bringing in value from the time we actually start backing it up to the point of, discovering some kind of an anomalous behavior and also helping you recover faster as well, right? So if I take you to the Rubrik console, right? So I just wanted to point out one aspect, that is the VM that we were actually protecting. It was this one VM, right? Now we do present a card-based view of every data set that we actually protect. Like I mentioned, we started the backup yesterday, right? And we've actually taken multiple snapshots for this as well. Now, ideally, one thing that I do want to show is that if I were to take the snapshot of yesterday and I were to just show you the files of what was actually available, right? I just want to take you down to that same path that we did, browse through. So that's 1 second. Let me do a quick search. Right. So it was basically the file shares that was actually impacted. Yeah, the file shares, the engineering department. You'll notice that there are no kinds of encryptions here, right? So these are files that was protected before the attack had actually happened. Now, the same thing what we did is that after we simulated the attack, we did the same thing, right? Now, say, for example, if I were to pick 15th one and, I wanted to see what actually files were residing in them, I can go back, do the same activity that I just did. I can say that in my C drive, where I actually simulated the attack was for the file shares, right? This is my file shares, my engineering department. Now you'll notice that these are actually encrypted. Now, within this duration, what Rubrik has also done is that because we have an immutable file system, what this helps the customer with is that you can be rest assured with the fact that it first and foremost does not corrupt our file system in any form or manner, right? Just like how James, did allude to it, that even if we wanted to, we cannot change the way Rubrik actually behaves. So with that in mind, when this when this attack was actually discovered by Rubrik, you immediately get a notification either through email or through any other channels that you actually define on Rubrik. You get an anomaly event from Rubrik itself. It points to the fact that what we've seen as a baseline is no longer the case. Now, the reason why we had taken a backup before was just to understand how the VM behaves, right? How the files usually changing. Once we have the baseline, in our system, after which any kinds of anomalies that we detect, any kinds of entropies, any kinds of high change rates, and also we are doing encryption detection as well. And once we detect that, right, once you're notified of it, so now what you have is, since the last time I've taken a backup, there has been an anomaly into my front end data, right? So it has pointed you to the fact that yes, something bad has happened. After which, what Rubrik also helps with is you can just do an investigate for it, and it takes you right to the server. It tells you what exactly has changed since the last time we've taken a backup, right down to the file and folder level itself. So say, for example, this is a server that actually did get impacted. So if there were many other servers into the mix, you would see a laundry list of servers, and also pointing it out to which of the files folders that actually did get impacted as well, right? So it takes me down. This is my C drive that actually did get impacted, right? If I just scroll down, if I take it down to say the file shares, you'll actually notice that Rubrik does it, from a level of confidence as well. We do remove the false positives, be that an internal or an external attack, right? We do, make it in mind that we point this out to you. We mark it as suspicious only when we feel that there is a high level of encryption in place, which is not normal, right? So I can drill down to the file, to the file shares itself, to any of the department folders that I want to get into, and you can basically see that every file that actually was deleted is now been added with a new file which probably is encrypted. So what Rubrik does is that it helps you with two things. One is that it ensures that you're also quarantining your reinfection as well, which means that it does not allow you to restore any of the infected files or any of the files that Rubrik finds it as suspicious. This is only because it should not end up being that when we are trying to restore from backup, right, you do not end up causing a reinfection. Now, the second thing, that actually it helps with is that if, say, for example, you do have an understanding of when the attack happened, right? What are the impact that the attack had done for your system? So what it means is that you're basically having a granular impact assessment for it. Now you have the flexibility to pick and choose what you actually want to restore. And just like how James mentioned earlier on, you have the flexibility of saying that, okay, I do want to, select something very specific to what I actually want to restore, and I can actually have that restored as well. And that becomes, a little one-click recovery with Rubrik, right? Now, if just to let you know the different kinds of options that we actually have, only because we do not overwrite or we do not want to do it on the same system, because you end up creating an isolated environment. Similarly, you have a list of options wherein you could download your good files. You could also have them overwritten as well, or probably restore it to another entity altogether. So it's a single click recovery for you to select what has happened to your system, right? For you to understand what the impact assessment has been for it, and also quickly selecting anything that is marked as suspicious or something that has already been deleted. Now I can do a very simple thing. I can basically just say that I want to select the deleted of my C drive, which are my good copies, and only have that restored. That's also something that Rubrik can help with. Now, there is a second value add to what Rubrik does beyond cyber resilience, right? This is also the ability to understand, whether or not what data was compromised, how sensitive was it for you, right? Now, Rubrik does, for all the, you can say anything that Rubrik does on the backend system, we do not impact the front end, right? So all of these, be that for data classification or for cyber resilience, all the processing is done by Rubrik itself. Now, with this, you also have the flexibility of saying that, can Rubrik also point out to me that what files of mine have been compromised, what, which files of those are sensitive? That is also something that Rubrik can help with as well. So you'll notice that the moment I say that, help me understand what data it is, right? It is basically to give you more sense of the data that is being protected. Rubrik can do that for you as well. So you can basically say that in my file shares, which was compromised, I do have a set of files, folders, which do have sensitive hits. It'll also say what kinds of hits these are, right? So that you can actually even put a dollar value to what was actually compromised as well. So it's in its totality, it is about not just having an immutable platform on which you can be rest assured that all the backups can be recovered come what may, right? And secondly is that you also have a granular impact assessment to understand what your blast radius has been, the ability for you to instantly recover back to your last known good state, and also preventing a reinfection from happening because Rubrik quarantines anything that is marked as suspicious, and also helping you with data governance, or giving you the flexibility of understanding what data of yours was compromised, and if that data was even sensitive sensitive for you as well.